The panel of the House, we agree with Faithfulness when it tells you that the opening theme basically lists out on the spirit, basically lists out on the spirit of this debate. This debate is predicated upon an analysis of the moral status of these entities. Here's the thing, you must analyze whether or not they have moral status. That is their moral status equivalent to that of humans? If yes, then you should buy the proposition that we are proposing on our side of the house, that these entities that have equal moral status to humans are deserving of ownership of themselves and then equal access to all the benefits that the human rights regime we currently implement has. If on the other hand you think no, they do not have equal moral status, then you have to buy the argument, right? And that's why we are going to be the team that engages moral status. In the opening half, all they're talking about is protecting these guys because it provides utility. These guys don't want it to go extinct. These guys think because roads are important and animals are important for feeding us, we should also protect them. We do not care. We think protection ultimately proceeds from moral status, right? If you think humans have moral status, then you would protect them regardless of their utility. So you protect a mentally invalid individual regardless of their utility to society if you think it has moral status. So if we can establish moral status, then we do not even need to show utility in this debate. We win. Before engaging moral status, let's talk about three things in this guy's case, and then we're going to engage faithfulness and their matter integrated in our moral status analysis. All they tell you in this debate is right must exist with awareness. Everybody on this side destroys that nonsense. Babies, when they do not have awareness, still have rights. But then they now tell you, oh, but when they become adults, they will have awareness that they didn't have rights before. But what about in the instance of individuals who are mentally invalid for the entirety of their lives? They still have rights regardless of that. What about societies, entire societies that have never heard of human rights in their lives? We still give them human rights, and we do not think it's justified for you to go and kill all of those entire societies. So awareness is not a predicate, it's not a presupposition for human rights regime. So that's nonsense. Also, they tell you that rights must require, this came with faithfulness, right? They tell you about all the state resources that will be allocated for us to prevent all of these things. We think this is also irrelevant in this debate. Sure, more state resources should be expended to protect them. But then we think a lot of state resources are expended to protect women and black people and many other individuals. All we have to do is show that there is moral status. If there's moral status, then it doesn't matter how much the state expends to protect these individuals. So they still fail to engage the moral status. That is the heart of this debate. So finally, they tell you about how ultimately we need to have that some entities cannot provide rights for others, right? So if you are like one species or you are one group that is the oppressor, you cannot provide rights for the oppressed. We think this is also rubbish, right? Because this is an argument against all oppressors changing the systems of oppression. So this is an argument against slave owners, for example, abolishing slavery, and that does not make sense. It's an argument against men giving women the suffrage, and that does not make sense. So it does not make sense for you to say, because we are currently the oppressors, then it's illegitimate if we recognize the invalidity of our oppression and therefore change. It is legitimate for oppressors to change if moral status can be shown. Let us show that. Three things we get from them which will be integrated in my material. You will get responses to what they tell you about the grave effects to this world, because they tell you that it's going to be terrible to us, we require meat and all of these things, which is a very more sophisticated version of what these guys tell you about the benefits, the utility of protection, but we'll be engaging that at its best case. They also tell you how superiority is the basis of right ranking. So if you do not have equivalence or symmetry rather in agency, right, if you have some kind of superior agency, then you should have superior rights as a result. We're going to be engaging this in our material. Then finally, they tell you about how interspecies competition is the fact of our world, so we must continue that interspecies oppression because of interspecies competition. Let us show how that is nonsense. This debate is ultimately about moral status. Let us analyze the history and progress of civilization and how ultimately the apex, the zenith of civilization, which is like a progressive civilization, requires the acknowledgement of all agents which are seen to have moral status. There was a time where white people did not feel black people had moral status because they thought white people were superior. This engages their narrative of superiority because they were superiorly advanced, because they had superior state institutions, because they were superior in warfare. If you think superiority is what rights should be predicated upon, then you should support racism, you should support sexism, you should support all other kind of isms. The only thing they tell you in response to this is to tell you that, well, we are all the same species, we are all the same humans, right? But at a point, even though we were all the same species and all the same humans, we were disproportionate in terms of our power, we were disproportionate in terms of our color, in terms of our religion, in terms of our geography, and all of those bases of disproportionate outcomes in our lives were the reasons why they did not grant black people and other oppressed people moral status. We tell you that it is similarly arbitrary, their lack of granting of moral status to animals. Because why don't you want to give them moral status? Many animals have social groupings, many of them have their own languages, many of them even use tools. Many of these animals, even if they lack all of these things, ultimately have what is basic between all of us, which is sentience. Their ability to pursue their own interests, to fend for themselves, to eat, to pursue their survival, which is what human beings have. So if you think sentience is a commonality between all life, of an animal variety, then why is it that you do not think that is a commonality that justifies equal moral status? Because on your own part, you just pick the arbitrary metric of being a same species. Their metric is very arbitrary. So if you can pick that very arbitrary metric, why not pick the best sort of holistic arbitrary metric, which is that sentience is universal amongst all animals? That's something they do not engage. But let us talk about why this is very important, right? We tell you that it is inevitable if a civilization is going to mature, that it must escape the morally bankrupt ideology of these guys. Their morally bankrupt ideology is that we must live in a world where might is right. Now, they have removed might is right from the realm of interhuman relationship, but they still believe in might and right, and they think that is a morally good philosophy to implement in the animal realm because we are superior to them. We think a day is coming in the universe where we will be looked back at as a very primitive race who used our might disproportionately against people who were inferior to us, not recognizing their moral status because we arbitrarily choose to focus on an in-group. Let us analyze consequences. 2 levels to this. 1, untangible consequences. Let us tell you positive effects. Obviously, everybody agrees eco-diversity is a good thing, species protection is a good thing. That's what you get from the opening half. But 2 further levels, we tell you about how there is actually a better quality of life for humans with a richer and more thoughtful diet. We already have something like soy, for example, that provides more protein that is healthier than meat. This is something that we are not exploring because meat is cheap, easily affordable, and we can just kill random animals and eat them because we don't consider them human. We think it's even better for us if we are looking at the health consequences and we are going to be consequential in our evaluation of this debate, for us to prioritize a thoughtful process where we look at the more varied menu of options available in the world rather than just access cheap meat or produce which are available and kill them as a result of our desire. But ultimately, and this is superior, this is like the best argument in terms of tangible consequences, we lead to like an enhancement of social cohesion by increasing our empathy threshold. Recognize that what this does is, if you live in a world where everybody believes that animals, which ordinarily we would think are inferior to us, are equal to us in moral status, and we want to protect those animals, that's a world that will have less racism, less sexism, because we would even think if we can extend our empathy to external species, why can't we deepen that empathy to internal species? Why can't we fix the divisions in our social fabric? Why can't we be better to other humans? Ultimately, expanding empathy only does the most good for human society, but I'll be very proud to oppose.